death and taxes. But you know what? I don't believe it. I believe you cannot avoid change. From the time we are born until the time we are dead, we change. Some of those changes are actually fabulous. I was thinking last night about my really fabulous changes, and I think one of my first ones was getting my driver's license. I don't know that it was so fabulous for my parents, but it was really fabulous for me. And I remember my first professional job. I was a developer for my first professional job, and I thought it would be just like school, where I would work alone in front of a monitor, and I would commune with my computer. I could watch the lights. Ha! It was on a massive IBM 360. I had to give cards to the key punch ladies. I had to give forms to the key punch ladies. And other people wanted to review my designs and my code. For God's sake. What were they thinking? So I quickly changed what I was thinking about that work really meant. So change happens all the time. And one of the things that's kind of funny in the organization is I meet people a lot who say, nothing ever changes around here. Now, I suspect that a number of you are either transitioning to Agile or have recently transitioned to Agile or are thinking about transitioning to Agile. So you're full of changes. So how many of you are in the midst of a transition to Agile? Okay. How many of you have actually transitioned? Good for you. And how many of you were thinking about? Okay, so I don't see any hands up, but who knows what that means. Because that could be anything. I have a couple more questions. How many of you are developers? Okay. Testers? Managers? Okay. Project managers or scrum masters? Okay. So we have a wide variety of people. Oh, BAs, business analysts? Thank you. Okay, so what I've seen a lot is that the VAs feel often like they got hit with a 2x4. We went from knowing precisely what we had to do to not having any idea what we have to do. And the testers are only hit with a slightly smaller 2x4 because you cannot keep up with developers if you only do manual tests. And the developers are surprised when people say, well, it's a team definition of done. And so if you don't help me put some kind of automated test framework together, how am I going to do this? So change, it happens a lot in the organization. And when you transition to Agile, it happens even more quickly, that there's a whole bunch of it. And when I was thinking about change, I was thinking about this business of inspect and adapt. Right? How do we actually manage to adapt to change? Because we can't keep doing the same things we did before. When I was a developer first in the organization and people wanted to review my code, I guess I could have said no. But it was clear I wouldn't have a job for long if I'd said no. So, and I really wanted my job because that was another transition that was a fabulous thing. I was living on my own, away from my parents. I had my own apartment. That's back when you could afford your own apartment with one single person. And it was fabulous. I had a car. Life was really wonderful. So we are all looking at change in a variety of ways, and we need to figure out how do we do this inspection and adaptation. So let me tell you a little personal story. I used to be normal. Well, okay, as normal as I ever am. Those of you like Linda and Eugene, Brent, yeah, you guys know I'm not that normal. So, but I used to not need a stick. And I used to not have to hang on to a podium. On September 5th, 2009, I had a vertigo attack, which I thought was really unfair. I'd had a half a cup of wine with dinner the night before. There's no fairness about getting the whirlies in the middle of the day when you have not drunk the alcohol to deserve it. Right? I mean, what was my brain thinking? And I believe I said exactly those words to my husband. I said, I haven't drunk anything. Why am I having a vertigo attack? And he said, it's all in your head, honey. Ha, ha, ha. Okay, great. So after the vertigo attack wore off the next day, I was still really dizzy, and changing where my head position was would bring on the whirlies, and so I called the doctor and got a prescription for meclizine, which is the anti-nausea, anti-vertigo drug that puts you back to sleep. So your choices are stay awake and need to lie down, or stay awake, take a pill, and go to sleep. Not very many great choices, but the good thing is that vertigo attacks don't last that long, and although I wasn't driving for the next couple of weeks, I was still walking. And I noticed that something really funny happened after my vertigo attack. Mark was talking to me on this side. Mark is my poor husband. Was talking to me on this side. I said, speak up. I can't hear you. And then he said, I'm yelling at you. And I said, no, you're not. It's the TV. He said, the TV's not on, and you can't hear me. And I said, well, fine. I'm dizzy, and I can't hear out of that side. Right? So I didn't think anything of it because I'd had this vertigo attack, which was really taking all of my brain cells to deal with. So I called the doctor a few days later and said, I'm really uncomfortable. How often can I take this meclizine? If I take it at 7 in the morning and at noon, can I take 2 more in the afternoon and get through the night? Because I'm only supposed to take 3. And she said, no. Why do you want to take more than 3? And aren't you just sleeping the entire day? I said, no, but I'm really uncomfortable. So, long story short, vertigo attack finally goes away. We think I have pressure in my ear, right? So I'm going to go to the ENT and get a puncture in your eardrum, let the pressure out, right? Little liquid's supposed to come out. Everything will be fine. Go to the ENT. She looks in my ear, and she starts grumbling under her breath. Okay, ENTs are really smart people. They have no social skills. Right? We think we need help with teamwork and social skills. ENTs, they put us, we look like the social bees next to ENTs. So I hear her talking to people, and the audiologist brings me in and says, okay, we need to test your hearing. I say, okay, test my hearing. And it's really cool, actually, the way they test your hearing. They have 3 different kinds of things. You have regular headphones that look like the Bose headphones, right? The nice ones that the rich guys on the airplane use. And then there are the in-the-ear things, and then there's a thing that goes over one ear, and then you switch around. There are all kinds of really interesting technology. And every time he tried to test my right ear, I would either say, when are you going to start? Which is never a good sign. Or I can feel it, because some of the stuff actually sits on your temporal bone, and you can feel, like when you're at a parade and the drums go by, sometimes you feel it in your sternum, sometimes you feel it in your bones. So you can feel sound, not just hear it. And so he said to me, the audiologist, you don't hear anything out of your right ear, do you? I said, no, I haven't heard anything out of my right ear for a couple weeks now. I'd like to fix this. Can you fix me? And he said, I don't know. Which was the first inkling that maybe something had really changed. And then when the ENT brought me in and said, you have had sudden hearing loss, which affects something like, of all the people who lose their hearing, something like 5 or 10% of them have sudden hearing loss. So I said, fine, I'll get a hearing aid. And she said, it's not that kind of hearing loss. Hearing aids work for your middle ear. You have inner ear hearing loss. You probably have sound going up until your nerve, and then nothing happens. So I said, fine. Well, I actually cried, and then said fine. So I went home, and she said, but maybe we can fix this. Here, take some prednisone. I don't know what the ball players do with the steroids, but I'll tell you, prednisone for a middle-aged lady is a nice drug. You feel no pain at all anywhere in your body. Now, you're not healing anything, but you don't feel any pain. And for someone who'd been sleeping a lot because of the stupid meclizine, I was now awake 20 hours a day. My husband didn't like that either, because unfortunately, my judgment was impaired after about the 18th or 20th hour. So probably after about the 14th hour, but let's not go there. So it was a very interesting week to be on prednisone. And then I went back to see the ENT, and she said, okay, we should figure out why this is. And we'll do an MRI. It's just a formality. So they did an MRI and found two very interesting things. I have a brain tumor. Now, before you freak out about the brain tumors come in many varieties. There's a kind called meningioma, which middle-aged ladies seem to get more often than anyone else. Mine's right here. It's about the size of my pinky fingernail, and I will probably live with this my entire life. This will not kill me. There's nothing there, right? It's one of those things that make you get MRIs every year or so for a number of years until either you or the neurologist says, okay, we're done. But the other interesting thing, which is something that's very rare, so you should take this advice, don't get anything really rare, is that I had an inner ear hemorrhage. There's not that many blood vessels in your inner ear, so I'm not sure how you get a bleed where there aren't any blood vessels, but you can. And since it happens to about 5 to 10 people per year worldwide, there's no data. So when I said, when will this go away? The neurologist said, I don't know. And when I said, what do I do? You know, the ENT looked at me like, I have no idea. The neurologist looked at me and said, I don't know. Mark looked at me and said, does this mean you can't get on an airplane? I said, no, I got on an airplane already before I knew about any of this stuff. I'm getting back on airplanes, what the heck? So all of this stuff was a big surprise. If you read my blog, you'll notice that I said a few weeks ago that I was surprised to be physically this old. But inside, right inside my head, inside my body, I actually feel pretty young, except for my vertigo, which I have all the time, and the fact that I'm now socially more inept because I don't hear anyone on this side. So it's a very interesting problem. Precipitous change with significant deficit is not something I would wish on anybody. Vertigo, I would never wish on anybody at all. So when you think about what this does to you and how do you continue with your life? Because I'm not ready to give up. The problem is I have the outlines for at least 3 or 4 more books. You know, at a year each, I have at least 3 or 4 more years, and it takes me a year in between to recover from writing. I have 2 children, 22 and 18. They're probably done with me, but I'm not done with them. You know, look, I am their Jewish mother. So there's a lot I have not done yet. Now, am I going to be mountain climbing? No, but I didn't want to mountain climb before, right? Am I going to be playing the piano? Well, if I was willing to buy one, I probably could. So the question is, what do you do now? And I don't know if you were interested. This is a little bit about what I see. When I walk, I have oscillopsia, which is a form of vertigo. The world goes up and down. So this actually goes side to side, but it was the closest I could find. I tried to take a little video with my flip, and it made me dizzy. just looking at it. So I thought, that's not so good. And then, I don't know if this is going to work. Oh, can you hear that? So, I have tinnitus. It's supposed to stop. Thank you. Okay, I have tinnitus in my right ear, which is a very interesting problem. This one, I was thinking when I was in the ladies' room, it sounds a lot like the swishing that you hear in the ladies' room for the toilet that's not stopping. So I hear that all the time. It gets louder, of course, the more ambient noise there is, which makes me even more socially unacceptable because I'm always yelling at people to turn the noise down. Mark and I, since I have perfect hearing in my left ear, we still fight about the volume of the TV. Right, so for those of you who are not middle-aged yet, this will happen to you too, right? You and your partner will not agree on the volume of the TV because everyone's ears age at different times. So what happens is when you think about an adaptable life or change, you want to think about what do we go through when we go. This is a picture of the Satir change model. And you'll notice that you start with old status quo, where things are the way they are, and you figured out how to work in them. You figured out how to live your life. You have figured out how to do your work. You have figured out how to work in the team that you have. Things are okay. They may not be fabulous, but they're okay. And the problem is that something happens. For me, it was this inner ear hemorrhage that was a foreign element. For many of you, I suspect it was the introduction of Agile, the realization that the team I thought I was a part of might not be the team I need to be a part of. If you were in Esther's talk earlier today, she talked about how the structures of the organization make people think about who's really my manager and who's really my team. That's all part of what happens when you transition to Agile. And after the foreign element, you go into chaos. Now, maybe you don't descend into the depths of chaos. Maybe it only affects your performance a little bit. But it's really difficult to know, how do I do what I used to do? How do I, as a developer, write the tests before writing the code? How do I, as a tester, take this user story thing with its minuscule acceptance criteria, maybe on a good day if I'm lucky, and turn it into an automated test? If I'm a BA, how do I actually create user stories? And how do I work with a product owner? And where do we have a product owner? And why are people all looking at me like I have to be it? So there's all kinds of questions. If you're a manager, how much management do you do? How much interference do you do? If you're a project manager, are you ever directive? Are you never directive? It's the questions abound. And so it's really hard to figure out what's going on until you get a transforming idea. For many people on Agile teams, the transforming idea starts to appear sometime during that first iteration, and often does not really appear until the end of the first iteration, assuming you do a retrospective. Because you can't, it's so hard to move from time-based estimation to scope-based estimation, right? So before, everyone said, how long is it going to take? How long is it going to take? And instead, you're supposed to work in a time box and say, how much can I do? Wow, that's a huge change. How do you change everything you know about this? And even if you know that's what you have to do, how do you then change what you do? That's the practice and integration part once you have the transforming idea. And then once you have this practice and integration part, you move into a new status quo. So I actually thought, so this happened in September. My hemorrhage happened in September, and Last October, I thought I was doing pretty well. And in November, things were, I thought, going fairly well. And we were pretty much, I had a bunch of travel, I think in December. I even went to Japan in January. So I thought I was really hanging in there doing a great job. And then came February, and I had another vertigo attack while I was driving. You think you were scared as the other drivers on the road? I was terrified, right? Because I knew that the world was not going around, but I didn't know where the world was. So I pulled over, calmed down, because of course, now I'm having a panic attack along with my vertigo attack, right? Isn't it funny how you can sort of see this in yourself? I can hear myself breathing, and I thought, you gotta calm down. You have to do this because you're behind the wheel of a missile. And then I thought, maybe I could be James Bond and sort of fly over the overpass in front of me. I thought, oh, Johanna, now you're hallucinating. Just give yourself a minute here, honey. Pull over, turn off the car, don't even look for your cell phone, focus on a point, right? That's one of the things that they teach you in vestibular therapy, which is the vestibular system is responsible for your balance, is to focus on a point. And for me, I always focus on a point up and to the left, because that's away from all of my other things. I have nystagmus, which goes to the right, so up and to the left is the best place for me. So I managed to stop the whirlies enough. I was within half a mile of home to drive myself home. And then in panic, because now the panic has returned, called my husband, my daughter came home. I was supposed to talk that night. Luckily, it was a mess. It was a mess. So after that vertigo attack, I was much less steady than I had been, even a few days later, right? So I had been pretty steady on my feet before, and now I was really walking like a drunk. There's a word for that. It's called ataxic. So if you've ever seen someone with cerebral palsy, or you've ever seen someone who's literally walking down drunk, I think that's the term, isn't it? I think that's it. So that's what I sometimes look like that when I'm walking with a stick. I almost always look like that when I'm walking without. Which, when my younger daughter saw me do that, she said, "Mom, you're concentrating really hard on walking." I said, "Yes, I am. It's really hard to make sure that the feet stay on the floor because I don't know where down is." And she said, "If you smile, people will not think that you're drunk." I thought, oh, okay. I said, "Is a goofy smile okay?" She said, "I think any smile is good." So I said, "Okay, I'll put this smile on. How's that?" She said, "Yeah, it's pretty fake, but they can't imagine that you're drunk with that." So it was pretty interesting. So there are all these things that go on. And no matter what happens, right, it doesn't matter how many foreign elements you have. It matters that you have some kind of transforming idea so that you can do some kind of inspect and adapt. Because if you don't adapt, you get stuck. And if you don't inspect, you never know what you can change. So let me go through some of the things that I've learned so far. The first is to actually see the reality. It would be really nice to think that life would go back to the way it was. But for me, it's not going to. And for you, even if your organization's decided to abandon Agile, you won't be the same person you were before. So no matter what, you can't go back to the way things were. And one of the questions that I always want to ask myself is, who can you fool the most often? I'll tell you, I can fool myself the most often. Up until the time we got a digital scale, I was really good at wiggling the scale. If you put your weight on the front of the scale, you weigh 3 pounds less, and if you have your weight on the back, And if you're on one side or the other side, I was really good at it. And it wasn't until my jeans got too tight that I thought, oh, I really have been gaining weight. So getting a digital scale was a really good idea for me. But we fool ourselves, right? With that was what I looked like as opposed to what I was doing at work. But we fool ourselves all the time. And so seeing the reality, the guy this morning who was talking about orient yourself, right, that's the see the reality part. Where are you? What is really happening to you? Are other people in the same position as you? Because later on I'm going to talk about asking for help, but maybe that's where you ask for help. So see where you are, see what's going on, so you actually have a shot of figuring out what's going on. Now, with every change, there's a loss. When you change organizations and you change products that you're working on, you have a loss of domain space expertise, right? Because you used to know about that product, you used to know the insides of that product. You were the go-to person. Whether you were a developer or a tester or a VA or a manager, you knew stuff about that. You transition out of one job into another, it takes you a while to learn that stuff. Same thing when you transition to Agile. It's not that you're no longer a great developer or a great tester or a great VA. It's that the way you do your job has changed. And for me, I think the biggest thing was saying, I know what I want to be able to do, but how do I do it now? So before I got the stick, I actually didn't need that much help getting on an airplane. I was a little, downs are very difficult to declines, right? Inclines are much better because I can look up, but downs mean I actually have to look down at the floor and make sure I'm not going to trip over something. So I used to ask to get on the plane a little bit early, and sometimes the flight attendants remembered and sometimes they didn't. But now that I have a stick, not only can I make elevator doors stay open, right? You had no idea sticks were so useful. I can also get the cereal boxes off the top shelf in the supermarket. I have turned into one of those little old ladies. I'll tell you, it's a real change in my mental model of myself. But one of the things that really happens is I really do need a few extra minutes to get on an airplane. I really do. But I can still get on an airplane. And I really do need to, if I'm going to drive somewhere when I land, I really need to arrive during the day. Because if I haven't been there before and I have to somehow look at directions, for me the act of flicking my eyes down and flicking them back up induces the oscillopsia. So I have a bunch of deficits I really need to deal with. So there are a few things that are very important to me. One is, of course, being able to read, because I'm an avid reader, being able to write, because I'm hopeless and I have to share everything, and being able to ballroom dance, and to be able to consult and teach. And I have learned a bunch of things. It turns out that I can still dance. I have a little trouble with some of the turns, and I tend to yank, or as Mark says, I use the death grip. Right, so if you've ever danced with someone in ballroom and you're supposed to make a turn, you're supposed to have an open palm, right? I'm supposed to just rotate it out his palm, but I often do this and turn his knuckles white. Poor man. He'll live. But I can do that now, and it takes me, a billion times to learn something, not a million. But I have also learned that I can give a talk holding on to a podium. You really don't want me behind the podium because I haven't grown. And I'm not going to, so it's kind of a scary thought. But I can do this, and when I teach, I can actually sit down if I need to. So it never occurred to me that I would do that, but I can. So when I say face the loss, it's what must you do in your life, right? Now, I have to tell you, I am the grocery shopper in our household. If I never went grocery shopping again, it would not kill me. However, Mark really likes to watch football on Sundays. That's U.S. football, right, for those of you who are not from the U.S. And so he turns on the TV at 12:30 for the first pregame show, and then watches football, and then there's another pregame show at 4:30 or 5, and then there's football, as far as I can tell, from 12:30 on Sundays until long after I go to bed. So I don't know what he's doing, but he does the laundry and watches football. If I want to eat anything other than cereal, I have to go grocery shopping. And so for me, even though it's not my favorite thing in the world, it's something I do, and it reminds me every week of the fact that I am still an independent person. I am not completely dependent on him for everything. In the same way that you want to think about, what does it mean for you and your teams when you go Agile? Are you dependent on other people in your team? In many ways, I hope so. But are you still the same person with the same capabilities, and you have to change how you use them? I hope so. So instead of thinking that I must code this way, the real key is I must code, right? Or if I must test this way, the real key is I must test, and on and on. So it's what do you need to be able to do, not so much how you need to do it. Because the how is going to change no matter what happens. One of the things, if you've read any of my writing over the years, you know I'm a huge fan of inch pebbles. I started writing about inch pebbles back in the 90s. You know about milestones, inch pebbles. So inch pebbles actually work really well in Agile, because if you are at the beginning of your Agile transition and you have not converted to user stories, but you still have tasks, you know that you can break your task down into 1 or 2 day tasks. And that helps you start moving from use cases or whatever you're using for requirements down into something. This business of starting small is a really helpful idea, right? One of the big things of moving to Agile that teams really find helpful is that they break these huge chunks of work down. So you have small chunks of work. When you are thinking of a transition, when you're in a transition, what you really want to think about is, how do I get some of this low-hanging fruit? How do I have some really small successes and show myself that I am capable of this new thing? So for me, I have to admit, it was walking from the kitchen into the living room with a half a glass of water and not spilling it. Because when you have vertigo and you don't know where down is, it's very easy to spill the water. And I really did not want to be dependent on anyone to get me a glass of water, because I drink a lot of water. So when you start small and have these small successes, these small wins, you get a little practice that allows you to inspect and adapt and see what else you need to get practice on. So you really want to think about, well, how do I create some small successes? How do I do this so I win? And when you think about it in the context of the team, if you're thinking about an Agile team, when you win, the team wins. So you really want to think about, what can I do that's small that gets me from where I am to just the next step? I don't have to climb a mountain to transition to Agile. I can take lots of little tiny steps. So let me figure out what I have to do for that. Now, one thing that I have not been good at up until now is asking for help. And I don't know if any of you saw me when Esther was trying to get her computer going, or when I came up here before and then needed to get back down. There's a little ramp down there, but there's a screen in front of it, and I don't trust myself to be able to make the sideways move and then walk down the ramp. So coming down over here is really my only option. But it's, okay, for most of you it's not a big step. For me it's a big step. So I ask people for help. And there, even last year, I don't think I asked anyone for help, Eugene. I think I just sort of got myself up and got myself down. But I ask for help a lot more. It still feels funny, because I have, of course, a perfection rule, as many of us do, that I should be just about perfect at everything I do all the time. Yeah, like that ever is really true. So it's really important, especially on your Agile transition, to ask for help. Your teammates probably don't know much more than you do, but if they know a little bit about what they need to do, and they know a little bit about what they need from you, you are much more likely to be successful if you ask for help. There's something interesting that happens when you ask for help. Instead of looking as vulnerable as many of us, at least as I used to think, we actually look very strong. Because asking for help is a sign of strength. Because that means you have enough self-confidence to put yourself out there and say, you know, I'm not really sure how to do this. Can you help me? Right, so I need help to go down things. I need help sometimes to get in and out of cars. Everything I do is a lot more slow. But people like Eugene have helped me, and every so often I say, Eugene, can I have a hand? And that means I'm going to push down. And he just stands there and takes it. So that kind of asking for help is actually a gift to the other person. It's a gift to you because it shows that you have the internal strength, and it's a gift to the other person or the rest of your team because they see that you are willing to work with them. Right, this business of interdependency is a huge thing. Now, the small steps and leading to some success really helps you feel this accomplishment. And the more you feel this accomplishment, the more you're ready to try something. So if you've ever been in a position where you had to start somewhere, a lot of times, people say, when they ask me about the project portfolio, where should I start? I say, just start somewhere. Write down all the projects you're doing. Or if they say, I don't know where to start with the hiring, I say, where are you? Well, we have someone coming in tomorrow. I say, fine. Make a list of 3 questions you want to ask. Start somewhere. Because as soon as you start somewhere now, you look at it, you inspect it, you adapt, you say, is that what I want to be doing? Is this the best use of my time? And that whole attitude of creating some success, doing a little bit of work, marking it off as done, allows you to take on more work. It allows you to give some feedback. Or I should say get some feedback. Because you want to know that you're actually being successful as you complete this. So the small wins and achieving some success are a big piece. Now, one of the things that you have to do is believe in yourself. So you might think of this part as a little bit of a pep talk. I don't really think of it that way. You guys were hired into your organizations because your organization thought that you could do the work. Yeah, the work has changed because you've transitioned to Agile. And so some of the things you got hired for are not the things that you need to do now. And instead, you need to use your brain and your body and all of your emotional connection with the rest of the people at work to figure out, how am I going to do this? Well, the first thing you need to do is say, I might not know everything, but but I believe that I can do this. This, I don't know if it's self-confidence or belief or what it is, but this piece that says, I can do this, this belief in myself, is something that's a very powerful belief. So one of the things that I challenge you is to think about how you describe yourself. And if you're saying, I'm just a tester, please remove the just in front of that. Or I'm just a developer, please remove that. Or I'm only a something. Take those onlys and throw them away. Because you are more than only or just. Right? You are a capable human being. So, one of the first times I drove after my first vertigo attack, I said to Mark that I wanted to make sure that our younger daughter drove with me, because if I was unsafe, I was going to pull over and have her drive, right? I was only going to go to the grocery store, but I wanted company, not just to talk to, but to make sure I was safe. But I really needed to try this to see if I was okay. Because I was afraid that if I didn't start driving at some point, I might never drive again. So I took a bunch of small steps that allowed me to protect the rest of society and myself, and say, okay, what do I need to do? And that was a huge first step for me. So for those of you who are in your Agile transition, think about, what is it that scares you? What is it that is the thing that you think, oh my God, I just cannot do this. This is a disaster. Figure out a way to break that down into small pieces, small chunks, and then say, what's the first thing I can do? It's a very agile approach to going agile, because you really want to try something, and then use, inspect, and adapt. See the reality. See what is it that has worked and what's maybe not working so well. What do I have to do about that? But all of you are thinking human beings. All of you successfully have worked. That means that you have the necessary capabilities to transition to Agile. So you have to think about, what do I need from myself to make this really, really work? So one thing you want to do is really retain your sense of humor. We started making deaf jokes in our house the day that my ENT told me my hearing was not coming back. I make many jokes about being a dizzy broad. I make jokes about calling myself a grumpy old lady, which if you heard the story with TSA a few weeks ago, you would not think I was quite so grumpy. So I think the key is, I always have trouble with this one. This is your life, and your life is the most important thing to you. And it's really important to keep things in perspective. You know, when I was younger, people said to me, don't care so much. What do you mean don't care so much? It's work, how can I not care? I spend 8 hours or more of my life here every day. It represents me to the outside world. How can I not care? And I think the key is you need to have that sense of humor. If you are one of those people that goes down into the basement to have a chuckle, that was it, once a day, whether you need it or not, you might want to rethink that and say, how do I get a little more humor in my life? I find that looking at the little ironies of life are very funny. So when TSA chooses me, right, so I'm this short, middle-aged lady who has a stick. When they choose me to go through the full body scan, I think, oh dear, I'm not the 18-year-old perky-bodied person. I'm the middle-aged, droopy person. This is not going to give them the little jollies back in the room. Now, guys are not laughing. I thought that was pretty funny. So I think it's, whatever makes it funny to you. It's not that I don't want you to care about your work. I want you to be passionate about it, because it is a huge part of your life. But is there a way you can reframe things so that your caring comes out in humor, that your caring comes out in being able to achieve small successes, that your caring comes about by asking for help, not by saying, oh my God, this is such a disastrous decision. Right? Because I've certainly said that about organizations with which I've worked. So it's really important. Now, the funny ha-ha is the really funny stuff. The funny ho-ho is the funny strange. So I guess my little story about TSA and droopiness was funny ho-ho to you. Oh well, I thought it was funny ha-ha. But the more funny ha-ha you have, I think the easier it is to cope with what's going on, right? If you can all say, we thought that was a 3-point user story. It turned into 17,000, right? A little exaggeration is sometimes good for the soul. People say, oh, yeah, well, we had no idea it was that big. That allows the ice to break. That allows people to say, so what if we think it was only 3? What were we smoking? What were we drinking? What were we thinking? So that when we go back to inspect and adapt, we can fix what we were thinking. That we won't think like that anymore. So think about how can you put a little humor back into the day. Because especially when you're faced with either deficits, as I am, or this big hairy transition to Agile where everything, well, not everything, but almost everything you know has changed. Right? You know the basics, but how it all fits together, you sometimes don't know. It's really helpful to have a sense of humor. I am not saying you should be a false Pollyanna. Oh, the sun is shining, we're all happy. I am saying, see if you can find a little humor in what's going on. Esther, actually, can I say this about your luggage, Esther? Sure. Okay. Esther said the other day that Delta thought that her luggage had matured enough that it could go on without her. That's a funny ha-ha way of saying, the darn airline screwed up my luggage. Right? So the difference between those two is taking that sense of humor and saying, okay, this is not the situation I would really like to be in, but maybe I can reframe it a little bit, find a little humor, and then go on from there. One of the things that I think is really important is that we focus on the results that we're looking for. A lot of times we say we're in this transition. And my question to you is, what has changed since you started? Go back to the thinking about the last project you were on before you started your Agile transition. Think about what the days were like. Think about especially the end of the project. Did you slip a day every single day, weeks and months on end? Were the testers freaked out because they couldn't run all their tests and they were afraid the risk of release was too high? Did you have any idea what done meant for anything at all? Did you have any idea when any of the features would come together? I suspect that even if you're having trouble with your Agile transition, even if your team is saying, oh boy, this is harder than we even expected it would be, that things are much better now than they were before. Much better now than they were before. That, for example, we can actually work in time boxes. We don't try and extend the time box. That we actually have acceptance criteria for a piece of functionality, even if it is possibly too big. that we have some of our tests automated, that our developers are thinking about what does done mean for the entire team, not just it works on my machine. That we don't get into the 90% done schedule game. Right? There are probably things that are not working for you so well. But say, look at the results that you've had so far and say, what is it that I have accomplished? What is it that I have done? Because without looking at those results, you can't go back and really do any inspection. Right? You don't have anything to look back at. So when I had a little retrospective myself after a year of living with vertigo and unilateral deafness, and I said to Mark, so I didn't manage to lose weight last year. He said, this is a husband tricking question, right? He said, oh, because that's like, do my hips look wide in this dress, right? You cannot ask your husband that question. There is no way to win, and he's too smart. He just says, He's no dummy. And he said, well, you look good. Isn't that a nice thing for a husband to say? I said, but I've gotten a lot stronger because I decided to do some strength training. I couldn't work on my balance at the gym, but I've really been working on strength training, and it's really showing. I can tell from the way I go upstairs. I can tell, from the way I bicycle, things are really good. He said, that's great. Right, he's trying to give me a little positive reinforcement there. And I said, I don't think I'm any wooblier. That was the word I used to use for my vertigo. Since I started using a stick or a cane, he said, no, I think you've pretty much stabilized there. I said, and I think we figured out how to fight over the remote in the living room. I like the TV at volume 12, you like it at 15, so when I'm there, I win at 13. He said, yes. So we looked back at things and said, okay, things are not so bad. It's kind of weird, but not so bad. So the key is, and when I look back professionally at some of the writing I've done this past year, I think I've done some of my most insightful writing. I've worked with some very interesting clients and helped them with certain aspects of their transitions and helped them figure out what to do next. So professionally, I've had a really fabulous year, although it has been punctuated by some strange events. So it's really important to say, what have I accomplished? Right? What has my team accomplished? What is it that, since we started changing, where have we gotten to? We may not be done with our journey, but we have gotten someplace that's very helpful. And understanding where that place is allows you to take the next steps to going the distance, to really saying where else you need to go. Now, there's something that's very important. You need to figure out how to discuss the undiscussable. In every transition, there are people who say, over my dead body. And sometimes they actually mean it. There are people who commit career suicide in an Agile transition. You may or may not be able to help them. But I will tell you that when you have significant deficits, when you have significant loss, it feels as if you're always going uphill. It feels as if it's impossible to make anything different. It's not uncommon for people in that position to have bouts of depression. Now, I don't think any of you are psychologists or psychiatrists, and work is not the place to practice, even if you are. But if you're a manager, you need to have the employee assistance program stuff available. You need to figure out a way to have trusting conversations with people so they can say, I really don't know how to work like this, and it's really making me nuts. And if you're someone like me with a bunch of deficits that appeared out of nowhere, recognizing that depression is a normal part of the loss is really key. So, how do you discuss what's undiscussable in your organization? I don't have an answer for you, but you need to figure out a way to do that. Because you can be like the monkey just so long with, see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. But if you don't discuss it, it just sits there like an elephant in the room, and eventually, somehow, it explodes. So acknowledge that when people have a significant loss, especially if they're perfectionists, and many of us are, about how they used to work, that there will be times when they feel quite uncomfortable, quite sad, and they may not know how to ask for help. So finding those ways to make connections, those ways to have conversations, is really key for keeping people not just a part of the Agile transition, but keeping up with it and staying at work. Because otherwise they will commit some kind of career suicide. And that's a really ugly thing to see. Right? So when I say career suicide, does maybe no one knows what I mean. Have you ever seen someone who was so afraid of losing their job, they did all the things they shouldn't, and then lost their job? That's what I mean by career suicide. That kind of thing. So really think about that. And the last thing on my list that I've learned is this business of perseverance. There's the daily perseverance that looks a lot like the daily stand-up. There's the looking back every so often and persevering that looks like a retrospective at the end of an iteration. And then there's a release perseverance where you want to say, what do I need to do so that I keep this going? Right? What do I need to do? Because if you're not changing, you are dead. And we don't want that. We have lots of things to do in this world. I suspect that each and every one of you has a significant contribution you have not yet made. I still haven't figured out how to write romance novels. So I'm not, I can write management books, but these romance novels are killing me. So I have lots of things I haven't done yet. Oh, and they won't be published under my name. I'll have to use a pseudonym, because otherwise, what am I going to do? But there are things I have not done, and I am looking forward to doing. So thinking about what is it that you need to do? What is it that you need to be? How do you make these changes, and how do you adapt as you proceed? That's really the key. So I will be happy to take questions. Yes.
I'm trying to formulate the question while I'm thinking, so I apologize. But
That's okay.
so I'm one of those people we're trying to transition. We're a larger development shop, and my program is within one line of business within a larger encompassing company. So right now we're pretty focused on sort of a single team transition. And can you speak maybe a little bit on controlling the speed of that change? As far as, how quickly do you start introducing concepts and the ideas without freaking the whole world out and trying to control that fright, or is that even possible?
Well, I think almost anything is possible. So the question is, how do you control the speed of change? So what happens in the organization is, as people make a change, they start at old status quo. There's this foreign element. They go into chaos. They get a transforming idea. See, who knew you could use a stick as a pointer? And then you have practice integration. every single person goes through this at their own pace. And every time you introduce something new, people tend to start back at the beginning. So if they do start back at the beginning, one of the things you want to say is, are there some things we want to do all at once so that we're going to use time boxes, we're going to figure out how to automate the testing, and we're going to have a build that works in less than 2 hours. And for the first 3 time boxes, maybe you do that. And you retrospect on that. And then as you get good at that, now you ask the team, what's the one thing to do next? I heard an acronym, OBT, one big thing. Did someone say that yesterday in our workshop? Yeah. So I thought that was a very clever acronym, that we're going to try one big thing for the next iteration, and the team decides on that one big thing. There's all kinds of pitfalls when you transition to Agile, right? One of the common ones is that people want to extend the time box, and another common one is that the managers don't realize you cannot afford multitasking. So you might decide to say, we're going to put the framework together. Yeah, your managers like multitasking.
We live and breathe multitasking.
Yeah. So cumulative flow diagrams, cumulative flow. So if you have that, it's a really good idea to say, let's see what the one big thing is, and as a team, when do we want to attack the multitasking, for example? Because it might be that you don't want to attack it yet. You want some of these small successes. You want some small steps, some early wins, some small successes. Get that under your belt, have everyone feel comfortable with that, right? Make sure everyone is in new status quo. And I wish I could tell you that you could just ask people. I actually thought back, so I was diagnosed at the end of September, and I thought, the next day, I'm in new status quo. I was not. I think I was not in new status quo until I actually started using a stick. Because I think up until then, I was in denial about how bad it was. So a lot of times, managers insist on multitasking because they literally cannot imagine a world without it. It's beyond their capability to imagine, right? They're not bad people, but they multitask all the time and they cannot imagine it. So thinking about where are we as a team? When are we ready to take on the next thing? Right? Maybe we want to get really good at this for a few iterations. And by really good at this, you make space inside the iteration for the multitasking. You just do fewer features, right? There's all kinds of things you can do. But it's key to say, where are we? When are we ready to do something more? When are we ready for our next adaptation? So this business of boundaries, right? What's acceptable for me to discuss with whom is a piece of your corporate culture. And you want to acknowledge and be ready to stick enough with the corporate culture. One of the things that Agile does is it makes management and project management very transparent. And you might first sit down over tea or wine, whatever is or chocolate, depending on what your manager or PM prefers, and saying, let's discuss how this changes everything. Because you might not be aware of what it looks like when you say these things. This is a form of feedback, right? So you create an opening. You say, are you aware, right? Are you aware of this affects me in this way when you do that? And can we do some joint problem solving? I think the key is you can have an idea in your head about what to do about this problem, but you cannot fall in love with that idea. Because if you do, then you are violating the rule of three. And the rule of three is every problem has at least 3 possible solutions. Because if you only have one solution, it's a trap. 2 is a dilemma. 3 now starts to give you possibilities. And people are infinitely variable. So you really want to, if you have a people problem, which is what you see when you start moving to Agile, it's almost always a people problem. You want people's help in figuring out what do they need to do and how do I help them? So I'm not going to say, you must do this as a project manager. I will say, are you aware? So let me see if I can give you an example from my early days. I have always been the queen of tact and diplomacy. Not, right? You got that part? And one of my managers came to me. I was working on something that we really wanted to release. I was the tester at the time, and the developer was working on, this is actually a device driver for a new hard drive. That tells you how old I am. And so we were working on this, and we had slept a week every week for the past 4 weeks. It was really horrible. The project manager had no idea what to do, and her idea of understanding status was to run to me every 2 hours and say, are you done testing yet? Are you done testing yet? And I finally said, no, I'm not done testing yet. I'll tell you when I am. Okay, this is not very helpful, but it was the best I could do at the time. So after we finally, we spent another couple days on it, and I actually asked for a meeting with the project manager and the developer and me. I said, look, we really need another way of looking at this stuff, because the developer was completely frustrated. He thought, every single time he thought it was right. I was completely frustrated, and the PM was completely frustrated. So I said, how about if we have, I didn't know to call them inch pebbles then. I said, how about if we have a series of decisions, right? We have this action leading to this decision, this action leading to this decision, and we'll do 4 of them. We can do 4 of them in a day, and at the end of the day, we'll get together and see what we got. Because we weren't succeeding with what we were doing. And they said, okay. And so we did that, and we finally got the device driver working, and at the end of the project manager came to me and said, I had no idea that there was another solution for understanding the problems, right? So if I had been mature, I might have said, can you think of another solution? At the time, she didn't. So when you help people think of alternative solutions for a particular problem, they are much more likely to go to sort of hang in with you. If you say to them, you're a problem, fix yourself, that's less likely to succeed. I mean, I don't think even I have said that to anybody. Although it's possible. I don't think so. So I think the first piece is get that person on your side. Make it a joint thing. And then see if you can give some feedback and engage in some problem solving using the rule of 3. And then if that doesn't work, send me an email and I'll come up with some other stuff. We'll brainstorm about 3 possible solutions. Because it's recursive. It works. Other questions? No? Well, thank you very much, and I hope that you all continue to adapt.
Practically all speakers submitted several topics for this conference, and Junta had to pick one, and we argued, and hopefully we picked the best ones. With Johanna, that was easy. We were unanimous.
Really?
Yes. And I can tell you, I don't know about you guys, I got a lesson in the last hour and a half. A big lesson. And this is not about transitioning to Agile or not about adjusting, but about strengths and about courage. Because, well, I look at the audience, we are all reasonably healthy people. We have no freaking idea what it is to go through what Johanna went, and we have no idea if it happened to us, how we would end up on the other end of this transition. We have no idea until we tried it, until it happened to us. God forbid it doesn't. And to have courage to recover mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, especially under the circumstances when physical recovery didn't happen yet. Well, thank you for the gift of asking for help, and I'm proud to be on the same planet with you. You're allowed to do.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Oh, I didn't tell you, if you wanted me to stay in touch with you, pick up a yellow form or give me your business card, and I have my bookmarks over there too.
And a few of Johanna's books are in the bookstore.